Welcome to English Learning Stories, where you improve your English through meaningful stories. Before we begin, today's vocabulary word is greedy, wanting more than you need, never satisfied. Today's story is called The Greedy Farmer Who Lost Everything. It is about a farmer named Jake who had a simple, happy life, but he was never satisfied. His desire for more land, more crops, and more money led him to make choices that almost ruined his farm, his family, and his happiness. This story is a life lesson about honesty, hard work, helping others, and being content with what you have. Let's begin. The greedy farmer who lost everything. Jake Miller was a farmer who lived in a quiet town in Iowa, in the United States, where the land was flat and the air smelled of fresh soil, and every morning he woke up early to work on his small farm. He had a red barn, a few cows, some chickens, and long fields of corn that he planted, watered, and cared for every day. Jake worked hard and his farm gave him enough food, a safe home, and a simple life. But even with all these things, he was not happy because he always felt something was missing. When Jake looked at his farm, he did not feel proud or thankful. Instead, he thought about how small it was and how other farmers had more land, better machines, and more money. His wife often told him that they were lucky and that they had enough, but Jake did not listen because his thoughts were always full of wanting more. Day by day, this feeling grew stronger in his heart, and without knowing it, Jake was already taking his first steps toward a hard lesson in life. Every day, as Jake worked on his farm, his mind was full of thoughts about getting more, and he could not stop comparing his life with the lives of other farmers in the town. When he saw bigger barns, newer machines, and larger fields, he felt unhappy and angry inside, even though his own farm was doing well. Instead of taking care of all his land equally, Jake started spending more time only on the parts of the farm that he thought could bring him more money, and he ignored the smaller fields and weaker plants. He saved the best seeds for himself and stopped helping his neighbors, believing that helping others would slow him down. Slowly, Jake forgot the simple joy of working honestly, and his heart became heavy with greed as he continued to believe that having more would finally make him happy. As time passed, Jake's neighbors began to notice that he was changing and that his farm was not being cared for properly, so some of them tried to give him kind advice. One neighbor told Jake that all parts of the farm were important and that even the smaller fields needed water and attention. But Jake did not listen and said he only wanted to work on what could bring him more money. Another neighbor asked to borrow some tools for a short time, but Jake refused because he did not want to share anything he owned. Jake believed that listening to others and helping people would slow him down, so he closed his ears to good advice and kindness. Without knowing it, Jake was turning away from people who cared about him, and his farm and his heart were becoming weaker each day. After many weeks, the weather began to change, and the land grew dry because there was very little rain, which made farming harder for everyone in the town. Jake noticed that the smaller fields he had ignored were turning brown, and even the crops he had cared for did not look strong. Instead of feeling worried and fixing the problem early, Jake became angry and blamed bad luck, believing that he still deserved more than others. He worked harder but not wiser, spending long hours in the sun while refusing help or advice, and he did not realize that his greed and poor choices were slowly leading him toward trouble. One night, dark clouds filled the sky and a strong storm came to the town with heavy rain, loud thunder, and powerful wind that shook the houses and fields. Jake ran outside to protect his farm, but the rain was too strong and the ground was too wet, and he could not save everything. The roof of the barn was damaged, some of the crops were destroyed, and a few cows ran away in fear. As Jake stood in the storm watching his hard work disappear, he felt scared and helpless for the first time, and deep inside, he began to understand that wanting more had made him forget how to protect what he already had. When the storm finally ended, Jake looked at his broken barn, damaged fields, and missing animals, and his heart felt heavy with sadness and fear. He thought about all the times his neighbors tried to help him and all the advice he had ignored, and he realized that his greed had pushed people away when he needed them the most. Sitting quietly in the early morning light, Jake felt deep regret and wished he had been thankful, kind, and willing to share, because now he understood that wanting too much had cost him almost everything. The next morning, as Jake stood quietly on his farm, his neighbors began to arrive one by one, bringing tools, food, and kind words. Even though Jake had refused to help them before, they chose to help him now because they believed in kindness and community. Together, they fixed parts of the barn, searched for the lost cows, and helped Jake clean the damaged fields. As Jake worked beside them, he felt thankful and humbled, and he finally understood that working together and caring for others was more important than trying to gain more for himself. After that difficult season, Jake changed the way he lived and worked, and he no longer focused only on getting more, but instead cared for every part of his farm and the people around him. He listened to advice, shared his tools, and helped his neighbors whenever he could, and slowly his farm became healthy again. Jake learned that true success does not come from greed or money, but from gratitude, honesty, and kindness. And he never forgot the lesson that losing everything taught him. Being thankful for what you have is the greatest wealth of all. Years later, Jake often thought about the hard time when he almost lost everything, and he shared his story with younger farmers and his children so they would not make the same mistake. He told them that greed can slowly change a person's heart and make them forget what truly matters in life. Jake learned that having enough is a blessing, helping others brings strength, and being thankful brings peace. From that time on, Jake lived a calm and honest life, knowing that the real success was not in having more, but in appreciating what he already had. This story teaches us an important lesson about life. Jake had enough to live a good and peaceful life, but because he always wanted more, he forgot to care for what he already had. His greed caused pain, loss, and regret, but kindness and help from others showed him a better way to live. The moral of the story is simple. When we are grateful, honest, and kind, we become truly rich, but when we are greedy, we risk losing everything that matters. Thank you for listening to this story. Remember, happiness does not come from having more, but from appreciating what you already have.